Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman and I am your host. And my guest today is Jane Martin. She is a psychotherapist and she's here today to talk about her work with teens and bullying, with teens and transformation, with teens and their evolution in a positive way. So welcome.
Thank you.
So your work is, I would say, somewhat unique, and I don't think there are a lot of people articulating it the way you are. So let's talk a little bit about what you are doing. You have programs in schools, and then you have summer programs. So tell me.
Well, I'm working with an organization called Retried, and which is my daughter's company. And so Retried is trying to make culture change, I guess you might call it that, and helping relationship with the earth, relationship with each other, and relationship with self. So all of the programs that they do has that theme in it. And
I'm going to interrupt you because I want to ask, that word retribe kind of conjures up a really powerful sound, and we know what tribe means, but say a little bit about the concept or the thinking behind the word of retribe and why it's important.
Yeah. Well, my daughter's thesis was about intentional community living.
Okay.
So it's all about how we are with each other. And so it's tribe is a little bit a connotation of going backwards, because there's a certain element of unconsciousness there in tribal culture. It's sort of a backwards movement. Mm-hmm. But so we don't want to lose what we have, which is our individuality and I am here. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of retribe, meaning it's a new way of keeping our individuality and free choice, but coming together on purpose to connect again. Because I think in our culture, in our society, we really are missing that connection with other people. You'll be in New York City and there's millions of people around you and you can be lonely. What's that about?
Yeah, and you and I talked, and you know, people choose lifestyles, and then the culture kind of evolves and brings out and evokes certain sense of either belonging or alienation. And you and I talked the other day, and you were talking about how, because of however we're evolving, and I think a lot of it might, or some of it might have to do with technology, where we're wired up to gizmos rather than to each other. And the gizmos are not going away, but I guess the trick is, how do we, inside of that context, focus consciously and intentionally on connecting? And you said that children coming into kindergarten and first grade now, if they're tested for empathy, that empathy has plummeted dramatically.
Yeah, actually the testing is in colleges.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's where there's a 40% drop since 2001, I believe it is, somewhere around there. So it's like very fast, sort of an exponential sort of thing that's happening in a lot of health-related sectors. Physical and psychological health is this huge exponential factor of change, and usually not for the better. And also teachers tell me that the kids coming in to first grade or kindergarten have less and less ability to, what I call skill number 2, do something other than what you feel like doing.
Yeah, so then how does that get translated in your work with retribe? I call it retribing, but I know that's not an actual word. But
I like it.
So I'm assuming that that's part of what happens. So let's say a little bit about what goes on.
Well, Retried is programming for all ages, adults as well as young children. We're focusing on the teen programming, which is rite of passage programming. So it's very deep programming, intense, because most cultures, actually there was an anthropological survey it looked at cultures throughout time and all around the world. It's a big survey, and 95% of cultures have some rite of passage process, a means, a socially sanctioned means to induce an altered state of consciousness for emotional healing and spiritual growth. And our culture, what do we have? You know, Budweiser beer or something. What do we give our kids? So our kids, our teens, are biologically wired really for this kind of intense experience where they can feel themselves to be alive, be awake, kind of a meeting with death, a meeting with drama, something intense, something that goes beyond this material realm. And their brains are biologically working, awakening at this point. The prefrontal cortex has been proliferating at age 11, 12. And now as a teenager, they're like, I'm ready now. I'm ready to have this new way of experiencing the world. And we don't have anything for them. So they kind of make their own way. They make their own initiation, so to speak, where they'll drive their car 100 miles an hour or ride their skateboard on the edge of a cliff. We were just talking to Coco, and just have this, and teen girls, it's all so dramatic and so on. They're trying to get this natural experience of rite of passage, and yet we have nothing for them. So Retried is, one of the biggest parts of Retried is to provide that experience. It's a 10-day retreat, and we use different means to create this altered state of consciousness in different retreats. So this summer we're having 2. The first one will be using breath work, which is a means of inducing entranced states, sort of uses yogic breathing. It's very safe, much safer than driving your car 100 miles an hour. Much more healing also.
Yes, I know. You and I did some breath work together years ago.
Yeah, and then also the nature processes, so we'll have solo sits and a sweat lodge and
Solo sit mean you're alone?
in nature, yes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this is all in a context where it's very supportive. The kids have small groups where they talk very, very honestly and openly with each other in a very safe environment, so they can sort of the rite of passage process. One of the processes is what's happened in my past, what I want to let go of, what I want to heal from, childhood wounds before I have kids and put them on my kids. Who am I? That big question for a teenager. And who do I want to become? What are my skills? What is my gift that I want to bring to the world?
Wow. You know, what comes to mind as you talk, first of all, I think, oh my God, that sounds so wonderful. And 2 things come up for me. One is, you know, so you describe how we haven't any rituals, so there's no guidance, there's no kind of intentionality to it. And so if you're using drinking and partying and all that as a rite of passage and not looking at it judgmentally, it's just, there's no beginning and no end. Whereas a ceremonial rite of passage is you get from one side to the other side, and then you're on the other side.
And you're an adult.
There's a completion and a healing, and yes, and a kind of a new you. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that when you talk about healing childhood wounds, I want to clarify something. This is not an experience for troubled youth. This is an experience for human being, and we all have childhood wounds, and we all have those things, and especially as teenagers, it's like percolating and we don't know what to do with any of it. And to me, this sounds like the opportunity to kind of just bring it up into the open in a safe space. And then also that whole idea of it's a peer group, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that you're going through this sharing together. Am I right in the way
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. They're very supportive of each other. Because we, at the very outset, the first thing we do is say, this is our culture, and we're going to make the rules of this culture, and what do you guys want the rules to be? And they pretty much come up with the same things every time. We want honesty, we want to speak that honesty with kindness, acceptance of differences, some kind of words they use like let the emotions flow, that we don't judge each other for that.
Pretty powerful.
Oh yeah, and they really hold each other in that.
That's great. And so then the question is, when they leave, what does that provide them going back into their home world?
Oh, a lot of things. You know, so many adults that I work with a lot with parents and children, and I was just doing a school up in Vermont last week, and so many of the parents go, okay, well, I know what to do for my kids, but then my own stuff gets triggered, right? It's like, then I turn into the big witch or something.
Yes.
The inner witch comes, and I'm yelling at him, and I know that's not the best way, but, and so in doing deep processing at a rite of passage, the teens can take that old stuff that would have gone into their adult life as triggers.
Right.
And heal that. Get the emotional charge out now and get deeper understanding about what happened. Be able to feel the feelings that they were unable to feel as a child, and to feel it now in safety with mentors, with the elders there and their peers holding them. So that's a huge thing, is not to pull those triggers all the way through your life.
And I think that particularly as teenagers, a friend of mine coined a phrase, I don't know if she coined it, but we go through life feeling terminally unique. And so nobody else feels like we do, nobody else understands us, and then we're ashamed or afraid to discuss it with anybody else just because we think we are terminally unique. And so just the sharing of it, I think, would provide some kind of a support to walk away stronger and more grounded in giving yourself permission to be who you are.
To be who you are, absolutely. We do this process called hot seat in the small groups.
Yes.
So one of the teens will be on the hot seat, and the other teens are basically asking questions. And they go really deeply into the hardest thing that ever happened to them in their life, or something like that. And so really being able to be seen for the truth of who you are and accepted. So many of those hot seats end in everyone crying and hugging that teen and saying, just really supporting them. We accept, we see you and we accept you.
Yes. Even having seen what you think is the worst of who you are.
What your shame.
Wow.
And that's how you heal shame, is just speaking it and realizing they still like me.
Yeah.
Remember this, I did a breath work with 24 teens, and it was, I'm just popping into my mind, the boys were going around and saying things like, I had an emotion and my friends still like me. I cried 17 years worth of tears.
And my friends,
I'm okay.
I'm still okay, yeah. My kids went to a camp that did similar kinds of things. It was a summer camp, but they used to have this ritual, not a ritual, it's like in the evening, it would be a gathering of the community and different events. And one time, it was a conversation, this was in the teen years, about sexuality. So the girls sat on the inner circle, the guys sat on the outer circle, and threw out questions. And anybody who wanted to answer from the inner circle would answer. And then they reversed it. So the guys sat in the middle. And so it's like this honest, open exchange. I mean, how freeing is that?
Yeah.
And most of us as adults don't even feel that free. So you have some pictures. You brought some pictures.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
So I was talking about breath work and the nature processes as being the means of inducing the altered state for the rite of passage that will be in the beginning for this summer. There's another means we use, which will be a retreat at the end of the summer, called Adventure Game Theater. And when the teens see it, they say, oh, it's the most awesomest thing ever. For me, I think it's an extremely deep psychological process. So basically what happens is the question of who am I is there, and they come, and there's some defining of what it is that's my personality. This is how I live in the world. This is the mask that I wear in my life right now. And so they're doing this process there where they're sort of taking off the mask. So they take their clothes off and put on costume, but they're taking off the way they think, the way they feel, the way they act, their personality. They're putting that on the shelf along with their clothes, and they're putting on a new personality that they create themselves. They can be anything they want to be. Maybe they're a shy, sweet little girl, and they're going, you know what, and it's painful for them. Maybe I don't want to be that way in my life. Maybe I'm going to try on being an evil witch and just, be nasty, and they, whatever it is they want, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe this macho boy is deciding, I want to see what it's like to be a cripple, and just, act out that part, and being weak and being dependent on other people. And
that's powerful.
How does that feel from the inside? So the staff creates a world, and it's very artistic.
I see this boy with his armor.
Yes, he's bowing. Honor and nobility is taught very consciously. And
gosh, those are words nobody ever uses nowadays. Honor and nobility.
Honor and nobility. Yes, actually, Rudolf Steiner, who's the creator of the Waldorf schools where my kids went, he said that if a masculine energy doesn't have an avenue of honor and nobility, that it will go into violence.
I could really get that.
And if feminine energy doesn't have an avenue into beauty, it will go into premature sexuality.
Wow.
So you can look at our society today and see what's needed just out of that.
And just looking at those pictures and the way you describe it is trying on those personas and experiencing them and actually realizing that you could be those things, that you could take off the mask that has been, it's not that that mask is bad, but you don't need to be stuck with it.
Yes. And you can choose.
Yes. And that you can have the experience and then choose to live with your version of honorable and noble and stepping into beauty, especially young women nowadays. I mean, how many of them, no matter how gorgeous they are, think that they're beautiful enough? Yeah. So now I want to translate a little bit into what you do in schools and how bullying and all of that integrates into what you do.
So one of the programs of Retried is called Social Pathways. And so what we do is, it's very much like an anti-bullying program that most schools have now, some kind of program like that, except that the basic premise is very different. And that is the means of change is moved from punishment, and the fear of punishment being the motivation for change, which is basic behavioral psychology, right? To a different way of looking at things, which is, this is the way we look. If a child is doing behavior that's difficult for others, harmful, we ask the question, what need is that child trying to fill, and how can we help him or her to fill that need using a new strategy that won't harm others?
Wow.
So that's the basic difference, and we do trainings around how to implement this way of thinking and support the kids. We have conflict resolution for adult to adult, so parent, teacher, or we can do group facilitation, board and faculty, but all with the same premise of conflict resolution in the sense that we're focusing on what are the human needs that we're trying to fill and what strategies are we using to fill them.
I think that's extraordinarily profound. One of the things that when we hear something terrible in the news and people get mobilized, and we're trained to think that, so you're talking about punishment, we're trained to think that just pass another law, or pass 3 more laws, or stricter laws, or whatever. And it has a certain effect, but it doesn't address whatever it was that caused the problem in the first place. So if you're not addressing the thinking that created the problem, then you're just kind of trying to rein it in and control it and keep an eye on it. But it does nothing to do, it's only effective as long as you have enough watchdogs.
Yeah. And when I teach about this at lectures, I make an easel with 3 columns, and I call it the 3 waves of anti-bullying programs. And I have little dandelions. So on the first wave, which is don't do anything about it, which some schools do, boys will be boys, there's just dandelions everywhere. And the second wave is the punishment wave, like that's just cut the tops off really fast. So there's this force, and it's an immediate effect, but the roots are still there. And then in the third wave, we're taking the time to dig out the roots. Why is the child motivated to this behavior? We could stop the behavior, which is just cutting off the tops.
Right.
But when you still have the root there, the child knows no other strategy to meet that need, and the need is still unmet.
Yes. Yeah, wow. And I imagine that you may have some difficulty enrolling people in the idea because we look for instant results, and I suspect this isn't instant. Although insights can start to happen immediately, this is like really training people to think differently, to speak differently, to see the other person differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually has pretty immediate results.
Really?
But,
that's awesome.
It is more of an investment. I think most of the resistance comes because when we say we're going to move from punishment to healing, people think we're going back again to wave one where we're not doing anything about it. But actually wave three, this sort of healing approach, takes more time. There's an article now I should tell you about. It's in Psychotherapy Network or magazine. It's a current article. It's called Sympathy for the Devil. And it talks about this prison project called the Mendota Juvenile Treatment Program, something like that. And it's an adolescent prison, and it's run by shrinks instead of run by wardens. So the state is paying twice as much money for this jail, but when they figured it out in the long run, the recidivism rate, the kids are healed, so they're not back again into the prison. The recidivism rate is so low that for every $1 that the state spends on this program, they save $7.
Wow.
So that's the kind of investment.
Yes.
We're making an investment of time. It takes a lot longer to sit down with each individual child, which a social pathways process would be, find out what the needs are, get them back together, have them brainstorm ways to meet all of their needs. That takes longer than to just go, you're suspended, you're suspended, you're suspended.
Right. And grounded and, yeah. It's interesting because I interviewed someone who worked in Trenton State Prison for 50 years. And his whole thing was, it starts in the juvenile detention centers. That because things aren't handled there, that's how all of those other people end up in prison. And so to think of a facility where you could actually transform the problem into resolution is...
I'd like to go backward. I mean, they talk about the school to prison pipeline a lot. That a child who's bullying is 4 times more likely to be convicted of a crime. Even if we took all 4 of those kids, we don't know which one, you know.
Yes.
It's still worth the money. When you figure it's almost $100,000 a year to send a kid to jail. If we took half that money and all 4 kids helped them psychologically, invested in them in the school age, let's not have them go there in the first place.
So the question is, how does one make that change? Because really, you know, we all hear those figures about it costs this much to keep someone in prison, and we all kind of throw our hands up in the air, and it's kind of, well, that's just the way it is. But it doesn't have to be that way. And what you're saying is, if we could invest the money now, we're not going to be paying it later. But who do you need to convince of this?
Well, that's a really big question. Actually, the program that I did for Not in Our Town at the Princeton Public Library, Not in Our Town is about to make a kind of what they call a roundtable discussion. So with police and school boards and so on, sort of different people in different jobs coming together to ask this kind of question of what can we do if we cooperate together to make more of this healing rather than punishing happen.
Yes. And will you be at that meeting?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great. All right, so tell us a little bit more about why people could get interested in this and what transformations you've seen. Not necessarily just social pathways, but the Retried camps. Like, you know, if I'm watching this show and I think, wow, well, if I send my kid, what can I expect?
To a Retried retreat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. The kids turn around. I don't know how to... They find their, I don't know, a strength, their inner core, their strength of who they are. They ground. They meet challenges in this unbelievable way. This one girl had OCD, OCD, like a compulsion.
Right.
And she just met it in this amazing way. I mean, I felt exhausted looking at her. I was like, just relax yourself and
Right, right.
give up already. She didn't. She's like, I'm gonna beat this. I'm gonna do this, and she did. She just transformed her life around. And when I think about it, if she didn't do it, she wouldn't have been able to go out in the world and go to college. And so, the kids, they cry the tears of whoever they didn't grieve. They kind of energetically push out that person who sexually abused them as a child. Or for someone who's not as wounded, like that doesn't have that kind of trauma, they feel into themselves that, wow, I'm here on this earth and I can help in this way. And what else am I going to do in my life? Play shuffleboard? This is what I feel called to do.
So to me it sounds like it's almost like birthing yourself in a way. And what it is an actual formalized process through which you let go of a lot of the things that held you back. You get to see the unique gifts that you have to offer and tap into the strength that you naturally have but didn't have access to before, so that you could go out in the world more grounded and feeling safer in who you are, so that you don't have to step into everybody else's version of who they think you should be.
I love the way you verbalized it. Can I copy that?
Watch the show. So we have about 30 seconds. Anything else you'd like to say?
Yes, in the second one with the dressing up of Retried, we are going to be offering addictions programming, video game addiction programming. This is a whole new area that's happening with teens, the video game addiction.
Yes.
My son, Dave, just got his doctorate, and he's going to be providing, in psychology, providing the programming there for that addiction. And so it'll be wonderful for them to, it's almost like a live video game.
Yes.
To get off their...
You be in the game of extracting yourself from the game.
So I'm really excited about that.
So I just want to thank you for being here. I think everybody should at least explore the websites, check it out, even as adults. And you have a lot to offer, and transformation can occur on a dime. So thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.